Welcome to our last set of notes for animals. We are in the phylum Chordata and the class Mammalia, where we actually belong. What makes a mammal is that they are endothermic, just like birds. They have hair or fur. They have specialized teeth, which we will talk a little bit about, so leave some space there. And the females will produce milk in mammary glands to nourish the young. We will also talk a little bit about that, so make sure you leave some space by that. The respiration of a mammal is aided by a diaphragm. We all have diaphragms. They are a sheet of muscle that lies below our ribs, and it cuts off our chest or thoracic cavity from our abdominal cavity. And it's this thin sheet of muscle. It's kind of like a balloon that when you inhale and you flex your diaphragm, it pulls it down, which creates negative air pressure in your lungs, forcing air in to your trachea. And then when you exhale, you are pushing this back up, which is increasing the pressure in your lungs and in turn forces air out. Just like the birds, we have a 4-chambered heart. So you can see here our 4-chambered heart. We have 2 atria and 2 ventricles, and that's the same as we saw in birds. This is different than the reptiles, where we had the 3-chambered partially divided, the amphibians 3-chambered, and the fish with just the 2 chambers. One unique thing about mammals is that our teeth are specialized. Different organisms within the mammal class are going to have different types of teeth based on what they consume. So this is going to reflect differences in our diet. And we can see here the incisors, these are these front teeth, are going to be used for cutting and biting. So when you bite into an apple, you can think about how you would use these incisor teeth to bite a piece off. The canines that are very dominant and prominent in this lion here, you can see, are the longer ones. And they're going to be for stabbing and holding. Clearly, this lion is a carnivore, and so what he eats is meat, where those need to sink into that flesh, compared to a plant eater, where those would not need to be prominent at all. And then the back molars and premolars, those are going to be for crushing and grinding. So once you've finally bitten that piece of apple off, typically most of us are going to move that to the back, to those premolars and molars, where we bite and crush, where we crush and grind that food, as opposed to continuing to try to eat it with our front teeth, which would be kind of weird. So those back ones are for that crushing, the front for biting and cutting, and those canines are going to stab and hold. For reproduction, mammals have internal fertilization. So the fertilization is going to take place in the female, and then there's going to be internal development, with the exception of the monotremes, which we'll talk about here in a minute. When it comes to parental care for mammals, the investment is really high. The mothers are going to have to play a large role in the care of the offspring because of the mammary glands. The mammary glands are going to produce milk, and those are the first meals of the offspring's life. If the mother doesn't get enough food to produce milk to help nourish the offspring, then the offspring will not survive. They're so dependent upon the mother for food, for protection, and everything like that. And so this is where we get the name for mammals from, is those mammary glands are going to be where the milk is produced on the female's chest or an abdomen. And the offspring will eventually become weaned from the mother's milk and be able to fend for themselves, but it's going to depend on its age. And there are 3 groups of mammals that are distinguished by the reproduction and development of the offspring. The monotremes are a group of mammals that lay eggs. These include the echidna and platypus. And what I mean by egg-laying mammals is that they have internal fertilization and external development. So the egg is going to develop outside of the mother, and then it's going to hatch. Marsupials, on the other hand, are kind of an in-between species, where the offspring is going to leave the mother's uterus and climb into a pouch, where it is then going to attach to the mother and continue to develop before it is actually like born 100%. Then we have the placental mammals. These are the majority of all mammalian species where complete development happens within the mother in the uterus. The offspring is going to be born live. Now, it may not seem like mammals have an amniotic sac, but they do in fact have that amniotic sac. In the monotremes, it's obvious because they lay eggs, so it's an amniotic egg. In the marsupials, it's still there as in the placental mammals. But what's different about it is that it's very soft and it's almost kind of translucent in a way where the female mother is going to hold the offspring in her uterus in that sac. So there's still a sac. When you hear mothers talking about how the water breaks, etc., that's the sac where that is being broken, is they're breaking that watertight barrier. So just because it's internal development does not mean that they don't also have an amniotic sac. So reptiles, birds, and mammals all have an amniotic sac, which allows them to have offspring without requiring a water source for development. The last two slides, we're going to look at primates. Since we are primates, we're going to finally go into a little bit more with those. So two of the characteristics that make primates are the grasping hands and feet that we have. We have what we call an opposable thumb. Our thumb is able to cross over in front of our palm and allow us to grasp and grab onto things, which is a unique characteristic of us in the mammal class. Something else is that our nails are flat instead of sharpened claws in that type of shape. We also have forward placement of eyes, which some other groups have, but ours are very prominent and forward to give us the ability to see depth. The last thing that we're going to look at with primates is the evolution of the Homo sapien, which is our species. You can see the Homo sapien here at the top of this cladogram or phylogenetic tree. And on the left here, we have a representation of the time passing. Over here, you can see our closest living relative. And I say closest living relative because all of the species here are extinct. They are no longer alive. 5.5 million years ago, we had a common ancestor with the chimpanzee where enough of a difference evolved in some of the organisms that there was separation of the species. And then this happened numerous other times where there was a lot of branching and a lot of differentiation of species to get to us, the Homo sapiens. And again, that's a lot of time that has passed and a lot of species that are no longer alive before we get to our closest living relative. So of all the animals on the earth, the chimpanzee is just the one that we are most closely related to as far as our ancestry down here. Currently, it is estimated that humans, modern humans, Homo sapiens, evolved in Africa around 200,000 years ago, but these estimations are slightly off as this information is outdated. As we gain more information and more insights into the fossil record and into dating of fossils, these numbers have changed. So that is the end of our notes for mammals and our notes for vertebrate animals. Please make sure that you have every video completed and watched, every note page filled in, and that you are preparing and studying for your test. The quizzes code is posted behind my desk. Please write that down so that you have something to study and practice over the weekend as you move towards your test.